My name is Clara, and for more than 30 years I lived in the shadow of my older sister, Alison. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, in my parents' eyes she was the one who mattered. She was the golden child who seemed to walk on water, while I was the daughter who faded into the background. What no one in my family knew was that while they were busy showering Alison with endless praise for her average achievements, I was quietly building a fortune worth $15 million. That secret shaped every choice I made, and eventually it exploded into the open during one unforgettable Thanksgiving dinner that changed everything. But before we get to that night, let me take you back to where this story really begins. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood just outside of Boston, our family looked picture-perfect from the outside. My father worked as an insurance adjuster, steady and methodical. My mother taught third grade at the local elementary school, nurturing children who weren't even her own with more care and attention than she ever seemed to offer me. We lived in a modest colonial house with a white fence, a small backyard swing set, and the kind of neat lawn that looked like it belonged on a postcard. From the curb, we appeared to be an ordinary, happy family. Inside those walls, however, the truth was something very different. From the moment Alison entered the world 2 years before me, she was set on a pedestal. I remember flipping through the family photo albums when I was still little. Entire volumes were dedicated to Alison's first smile, her first steps, her kindergarten graduation. When I looked for my milestones, they were squeezed into 1 or 2 pages near the back, almost like an afterthought. It was in those small, subtle moments that the message became clear. My sister deserved to be celebrated, and I was expected to quietly endure. The favoritism never came in one grand gesture. It showed up in countless small ways that added up over time like tiny paper cuts that never healed. When Alison started dance lessons, my parents were there at every recital. They sat proudly in the front row, clutching bouquets of roses and snapping roll after roll of photos. The living room slowly turned into a shrine of her accomplishments, trophies and framed portraits smiling down from every surface. By contrast, when I won the state science fair at 12 years old, neither of them bothered to attend the ceremony. Alison had a dance competition that same day, and that was more important. My award certificate ended up shoved in a desk drawer, never displayed, never spoken about. Christmas mornings revealed the same imbalance in painful clarity. Alison unwrapped gifts she had specifically requested: elegant clothes, jewelry, electronics. I received practical things or generic presents that felt like afterthoughts. One year stands out vividly. Alison opened a delicate gold necklace with a sapphire pendant that sparkled against her blue eyes. I was handed a box filled with educational books about scientists. Not that I disliked science, but the difference was unmistakable. Alison received beauty, while I was pushed toward practicality. The message was clear even if no one said it out loud. The way we were disciplined told the same story. If Alison broke curfew or lied about where she had been, my parents sat her down and gently encouraged her to make better choices. If I did the same thing, I was grounded immediately, sometimes with a list of extra chores added on for good measure. The double standard was so blatant that even neighbors would occasionally comment on it, though my parents brushed such remarks aside as if no one else could possibly understand. Even our bedrooms became silent evidence of unequal love. Alison's room was redecorated every few years to match her changing interests. First ballerinas, then teenage pop stars, then a sophisticated setup with a vanity and a cushioned window seat. My room, on the other hand, stayed exactly the same from elementary school through high school graduation. The pale yellow walls never changed. The old wooden furniture stayed in place. When I once asked to paint the walls navy blue in 8th grade, my mother shook her head and said there was no money for frivolous changes. 2 weeks later, they surprised Alison with an entire bedroom makeover. By the time I was a teenager, I had already figured out the unspoken rule. The only way to get even a sliver of recognition was through academics. Alison was a solid B student, always praised for her outgoing personality. I was the one who brought home straight A's, who stayed up late at night working through textbooks, who joined every academic club available. But even those victories were met with distracted nods or empty platitudes. "That's nice," my parents would say, before quickly pivoting the conversation back to Alison's social life or latest performance. Their dismissal could have crushed me, but instead it hardened me. I learned to stop expecting applause. I learned to become fiercely independent. By the time I was 13, I no longer asked for rides to competitions or reminders about deadlines. I handled everything on my own. The one person who saw me truly saw me was my grandmother, Elizabeth. She was my father's mother, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had spent her career as an accountant at a time when few women had such jobs. Every week, I would visit her, and she would sit me down at her kitchen table with a plate of cookies and ask questions no one else cared to ask. She wanted to know about my classes, my projects, my ideas. She listened in a way my parents never did. When I was 15, she asked if I knew what compound interest was. I didn't. She pulled out a notepad and explained how money could grow over time. That afternoon changed my life forever. From then on, she became my secret teacher in all things financial. She showed me how to save, how to invest, how to think about money not as something to spend, but as a tool to build freedom. Her lessons became the seed of everything I would later achieve. But in those teenage years, they were also something more, proof that someone believed in me, that someone thought I was worth investing in. When she told me one day, "True wealth isn't flashy, Clara. The richest person in the room is rarely the one showing it off." I etched those words into my heart. High school should have been my moment to shine. I was valedictorian. I earned a full scholarship to the state university, and I was accepted into the highly competitive business program. I should have felt on top of the world. Yet, even as I stood at the podium delivering my graduation speech, I could see my father holding up his camcorder and realized later he had spent most of the recording focused on Alison's reactions instead of my words. At my graduation party, while relatives gathered around, my parents went on and on about Alison's acceptance into a private university despite her average grades. My accomplishments were mentioned in passing, as though they were nice but not worth dwelling on. That evening, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I promised myself something. One day, I would create a life so extraordinary that no one could dismiss me again. Whether my family ever recognized it or not, I would build something undeniable. When the time came for college, the differences between us became impossible to ignore. Alison was whisked off to her private university with brand new furnishings, coordinated bedding, a shiny new laptop, and a care package lovingly prepared. My parents drove 6 hours to help her settle in, staying the entire weekend to make sure she was comfortable. For me, the drop-off at my scholarship-funded dorm was over in less than half an hour. My father carried my 2 old suitcases up 3 flights of stairs, set them down on the bed, and patted me on the shoulder. "You'll figure it out, Clara. You've always been independent." And just like that, he was gone, racing back home to prepare yet another package for Alison, who had been away at college only 2 weeks and was already homesick. Throughout that first semester, my phone calls home were filled with stories about Alison. Her new sorority, her parties, her struggles with classes. When I mentioned my perfect GPA, my mother responded with a quick, "That's nice, honey, but did I tell you Alison was invited to join the best sorority on campus?" It was clear where their attention and energy went, and it wasn't me. Money highlighted the favoritism even more. My parents contributed nothing to my expenses, reminding me I had a scholarship whenever I hinted at financial stress. Meanwhile, they not only paid Alison's full tuition, they gave her a monthly allowance. To make ends meet, I worked 3 jobs. I opened the coffee shop most mornings, shelved books at the library on weekends, and tutored classmates in economics and finance late at night. Sleep was rare, exhaustion constant, but I never let my grades slip. During my sophomore year, everything began to change. Professor Lambert, my financial analysis instructor, pulled me aside one day after class. "Clara," he said, leaning against his desk. "In my 25 years of teaching, I've rarely seen someone with your instinct for financial markets. Have you thought about where you want to take this talent? His question marked the start of a turning point. Professor Lambert became the mentor I desperately needed, introducing me to people in the industry and helping me land internships that most students only dreamed of. That summer, while Alison backpacked across Europe on my parents' dime, I was working 60-hour weeks at Maxwell Investments, shadowing the chief strategy officer. I soaked up everything I could, from market analysis to client strategy. It was exhilarating to finally be in a place where my work mattered and people recognized my ability. But then, life delivered one of the hardest blows I had ever faced. During my senior year, my grandmother Elizabeth passed away unexpectedly from a stroke. I had lost not only a mentor, but the one person who had consistently believed in me. Her absence left a hollow ache, but a month later, I received a letter from her attorney. She had left me her entire savings, $50,000. My parents were shocked. They had assumed any inheritance would be split equally or, more likely, favor Alison. At dinner, my father suggested I share it with my sister, who was considering graduate school. My mother chimed in, saying Alison's dreams were expensive, while I had always managed fine on my own. For the first time, I looked them in the eye and refused. "This is my inheritance from the one person who supported me," I told them firmly. "And I will use it exactly as she would have wanted." That money became the seed of everything. I invested every penny, carefully applying the principles my grandmother had taught me. Over time, it grew. It was the foundation on which my future would be built. After graduation, I moved to New York and accepted a position at Blackstone Financial in their emerging markets division. My starting salary was modest by city standards, but I made sure to invest half of every paycheck. I lived in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates, skipped luxuries, and taught myself to spot opportunities others missed. While colleagues focused on safe bets, I was studying emerging technologies and sustainable energy industries that hadn't yet become mainstream. By the time I was 26, I had saved enough to take a calculated risk. I left my job and launched my own investment firm. I called it Warren Strategic Partners, intentionally choosing a name that gave nothing away about who was behind it. I poured my energy into finding undervalued companies with innovative technology and strong female leadership. My first breakthrough came when I invested heavily in a biotech startup led by women. Their groundbreaking diagnostic tool was acquired within a year, and my initial investment multiplied tenfold. By the age of 27, my net worth had crossed the $1 million mark, though no one in my family had a clue. From that point forward, my life took on 2 very different identities. To the outside world, and especially to my family, I was just Clara, the daughter who had taken a stable but boring finance job. To those who worked alongside me, I was the ambitious founder of a boutique firm that was slowly gaining traction in some of the most competitive markets in the world. I moved into a modest apartment in Manhattan, comfortable but far from flashy, and continued building my company with quiet determination. In truth, I was doing far better than I let on. By the age of 30, my personal net worth had reached $5 million, and within 2 more years, it had tripled to $15 million. My firm had grown to 15 employees and managed over $200 million in assets. We developed strategies that combined careful analysis with calculated risk-taking, often buying into companies that everyone else overlooked. One of my proudest moments came when I invested in renewable energy storage companies right before sweeping policy changes sent the entire sector skyrocketing. Another win followed when I recognized an early pattern in consumer technology adoption and placed bets on 3 obscure firms that were later swallowed by massive tech giants. Yet, through all this, I never once revealed the truth to my family. I carefully maintained the illusion of ordinariness. When I visited them, I drove a rented Toyota instead of my Tesla. I wore simple jeans and plain sweaters rather than designer outfits. I kept my hair pulled back and my makeup minimal. I answered questions about work with vague comments like, "Oh, things are steady," and then sat quietly while my parents gushed about Alison's latest promotion. To them, Alison was the star. She had bounced from one marketing job to another, never earning more than an average salary, but her creativity and charm were always celebrated. The reason I kept my secret was complicated. On one level, I feared that if my parents knew the truth, they would pressure me to share my wealth not for themselves, but for Alison. All my life, they had stepped in to cover her apartment deposits, to bail her out of debt, to help with her car payments. Why wouldn't they expect me to fund her lifestyle now? On another level, I dreaded the possibility that they would only value me once money entered the picture. After decades of being overlooked, I couldn't stomach the thought that financial success would suddenly make me worthy of attention. And perhaps deepest of all, I simply wanted to protect what I had built. Every dollar was the result of my independence, my determination, and the lessons my grandmother had instilled in me. To hand that over to people who had never believed in me felt unbearable. Still, in New York, I allowed myself to live differently. I attended exclusive industry events, sat on the boards of promising startups, and was even profiled in major business publications. I owned beautiful clothes and jewelry that stayed tucked away when I traveled home. I dated men who admired my ambition and understood the drive it took to succeed. It was like living in two separate worlds, switching masks depending on the stage. For years, I told myself I was fine with this arrangement, that I had accepted my role in my family, that I didn't need their recognition. But then, everything began to shift the day I met Michael. Michael was an architect, talented and established in his own right. From our very first date, he had a way of seeing through my walls. He asked questions no one else ever thought to ask, and he noticed when my answers seemed too small, too practiced. After 3 months of dating, he caught me off guard during dinner at my apartment. I had just hung up from a phone call with my mother, another one of those conversations where I described my day in bland, unremarkable terms. Michael looked at me with curiosity and asked, "Why do you downplay your success when you talk to your family?" I tried to brush it off. I don't downplay it. They just aren't interested in finance. But he didn't let it slide. "Clara, you're one of the most successful people I know. You manage hundreds of millions in assets, and I just read an article where Forbes called you one of the most influential women in business. Yet you tell your mother that you checked spreadsheets today. Why?" The question stopped me cold. I realized I didn't have a simple answer. Later that night, I told Michael everything about my childhood, about Alison, about the years of favoritism and neglect. He listened without interruption, then said something that settled deep inside me. "Living two separate lives must be exhausting. Don't you want to just be your whole self, even with them?" His words lingered in my mind for weeks. As Thanksgiving approached, I made a decision. I wouldn't put on the mask this year. I wasn't going to announce my wealth dramatically, but I would stop actively hiding it. Michael would come home with me. I would wear the clothes I actually liked, and if anyone asked about my work, I would answer honestly. It was a small step toward authenticity, but it felt monumental. To ease into it, I bought my parents a gift, a new television to replace the ancient one they had been using for over a decade. It wasn't extravagant by my standards, but it was nicer than the small, generic gifts I usually gave. I wrapped it in silver paper with a neat blue bow and felt a strange mix of nerves and anticipation as Michael and I packed it into the car for the drive north. As we pulled onto my parents' street that Wednesday evening, my stomach tightened. Alison's brand new Audi sat proudly in the driveway, and I already knew my parents had helped her finance it. Michael squeezed my hand and smiled reassuringly. "Showtime," I muttered under my breath as we stepped out into the crisp November air. The moment we stepped through the front door, the script of my family life began to play out with predictable precision. My mother rushed straight past me to hug Michael, beaming as though she had just won a prize by meeting my successful boyfriend. My father gave me a distracted pat on the shoulder before calling down the hallway, "Alison, your sister's here." And then Alison appeared, perfectly styled as always, with freshly highlighted hair and a smile that barely reached her eyes. "Clara," she said with exaggerated warmth, giving me a brief hug that felt more like a formality than affection. Then she turned her full attention to Michael, appraising him with a glint of approval. "So you're the famous architect. Mom's been telling me all about you." As they exchanged pleasantries, I glanced around the living room. The mantel was crowded with glossy photographs of Alison and her husband Brad on a recent trip to Hawaii, a trip I knew my parents had helped finance. My own presence in the house was represented by a single faded graduation photo tucked off to the side. The imbalance was as clear as ever, and I felt the familiar sting of being erased. That evening's dinner set the tone. My mother had prepared all of Alison's favorite dishes, even the complicated Swedish meatballs that took hours to make. When I offered to help, she waved me off. "No need, honey. Alison already set the table so beautifully." The conversation revolved entirely around Alison's recent promotion to senior marketing manager. She spoke with theatrical flair about her new office with a window view, about the 2 junior employees she supervised, about how her people skills had earned her the job. My parents nodded along proudly, hanging on every word. It wasn't until dessert that my mother turned to me. "And how's your job going, Clara? Still doing this spreadsheet thing?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Alison cut in with a laugh. She wouldn't know what to do with a promotion anyway. Remember how she always hated being the center of attention? She's happier behind a desk. The dismissal was sharp and familiar, and though Michael squeezed my hand under the table, I swallowed my response. Later that night, when we discovered that Alison and Brad had been given the master guest suite with a queen bed and private bathroom while Michael and I were assigned the pull-out sofa in the cramped guest room, I finally voiced my frustration. My mother looked genuinely perplexed. "Alison and Brad are used to a certain standard of living," she explained. "And you know your sister has back problems. You've always been less fussy." Michael whispered in the dark. "Are they always like this?" I answered with a bitter smile. "Actually, they're on better behavior because you're here." The next morning, Thanksgiving Day, I overheard something that shook me. Standing just out of sight in the hallway, I heard my parents' voices drifting from the kitchen. "I just don't understand why Clara hasn't progressed more in her career," my mother said. "She was always good at math." My father sighed. "Some people just don't have ambition. She's always been content with less, not like Alison." Alison chimed in, her tone dripping with pity. "I almost feel bad for her. And now she's brought home this really successful guy. I give it 6 months before he realizes she's not on his level." The words sliced through me. After all these years, nothing had changed. Michael found me frozen in the hallway, tears stinging my eyes. He gently took my hand and whispered, "It's time they knew who you really are." That afternoon, while helping in the kitchen, I had to take a call from my office. One of our major investments was finalizing, and my input was essential. I stepped into the backyard, speaking with confidence about million-dollar figures and strategic shifts. When I hung up, Alison was standing at the door, her expression sharp. "Who was that? Doesn't sound like a spreadsheet call." "Just work," I muttered, trying to pass her, but she blocked my path. "Since when do analysts talk about portfolios and 7-figure returns? What's your real job, Clara?" Before I could answer, my mother called us back inside. Alison gave me a long, calculating look, and I knew the walls around my secret were beginning to crack. At dinner, Michael made casual conversation with Brad and mentioned our upcoming trip to Tokyo. "Clara has a new client there," he explained. "We're staying a few extra days to explore." Alison's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. I could feel the tension gathering like a storm. The dining room was set with my mother's best china, a golden turkey in the center, surrounded by all the traditional sides. We bowed our heads for grace, and for the first 15 minutes, everything was calm. Then I quietly brought in the wrapped television, setting it against the wall. My mother raised her brows. "What's that?" "Just an early Christmas present," I said. "Thought you'd enjoy it for the holiday games." When the paper came off and my father saw the sleek 55-inch screen, his eyes widened. "Clara, this is too much. These cost a fortune." "It was on sale," I lied. But Alison was already snapping photos of the model number. Within seconds, she announced, $1,500. How can you afford this on a mid-level salary? I felt Michael's steadying hand on my knee. Taking a deep breath, I decided to test the waters. Actually, my company has grown. I'm in a leadership position now. Alison's laugh was sharp. Leadership? Last year you said you were still in the same job. The truth is, I said slowly, I own my own investment firm. We've done well. The room fell into stunned silence. My father looked as if I had spoken a foreign language. My mother stared at Alison, as though waiting for her to interpret. Alison's fingers flew across her phone screen, and suddenly her face went pale. She read aloud, her voice trembling with outrage. Clara Warren, CEO of Warren Strategic Partners, managing over $200 million in assets. Featured in Forbes, net worth of $15 million. The words hung in the air. My father's fork froze halfway to his mouth. My mother gasped. Alison slammed her phone onto the table. $15 million? All this time you let us believe you were ordinary, while Mom and Dad struggled to help me with bills? How selfish can you be? I rose slowly from my chair, my heart pounding. Selfish? My voice was steady, but inside I was shaking. Do you want to know what selfish looks like, Alison? It looks like a childhood where your every recital was treated like Broadway while my science fair awards gathered dust. It looks like a lifetime of hand-me-downs while you received designer clothes. It looks like parents filming your reactions during my graduation speech. And now, when you discover that I built something incredible without your support, suddenly I matter because of money? For once, Alison had no immediate response. My father sat frozen, speechless. My mother wept silently. Michael reached for my hand, but I stood tall, looking around the table that had never truly had a place for me. The air in the dining room grew heavy, thick with the weight of words that could never be taken back. Alison was the first to break the silence. Her face was flushed, her voice trembling with fury as she jabbed a finger toward me. Do you know what we could have done with that money, Clara? Brad and I have wanted to buy a house for years. Mom and Dad have dipped into their retirement just to help us with basic bills, and you've been hoarding millions. You've been sitting there, pretending to be small, while we struggled. Her accusations landed like blows, but I stood my ground. I wasn't hoarding. I was building something, brick by brick, from nothing. Every dollar I have came from long nights, relentless work, and sacrifices no one in this family ever noticed. And do you really think it would have mattered if I'd told you earlier? Would you have celebrated me then? Or would you have demanded access, just like you're doing now? Alison's eyes blazed. That's not the point. Family helps family. Family also recognizes each other. I shot back. Family celebrates the quiet daughter's science fair win as much as the other's recital. Family notices when one child graduates valedictorian instead of only talking about the other's college acceptance. Where was that family when I was growing up? My father whispered almost to himself, $15 million. The disbelief in his tone was almost pitiful. My mother finally found her voice, though it trembled as she spoke. We never meant to make you feel less loved, Clara. We just thought Alison needed more support. You always seemed so capable. Capable because I had to be, I replied. Independent because no one else was going to step in. Don't confuse survival with strength. Michael, who had been silent out of respect, leaned forward. From what I've seen, Clara has been giving to this family her entire life, just not financially. She gave in patience, in silence, in acceptance of being overlooked. Maybe it's time someone gave her basic respect in return. Alison's voice cracked into a near scream. Nobody asked you. You don't understand what it's like. We've been scraping by, and she's been sitting on a mountain of money. I placed my napkin neatly on the table. We're done here. Michael and I will be staying at a hotel tonight. Alison looked at me with disbelief. You can't just walk away after dropping this on us. Watch me, I said. As we stepped out into the icy November night, I felt lighter than I had in years. Behind me, my father sat motionless, my mother sobbing quietly, Brad staring at his plate, and Alison seething with the realization that the sister she had always dismissed had surpassed her in every measure society valued. Thanksgiving dinner was over, and so was the old script of my life. The Marriott hotel room felt like sanctuary. Michael ordered room service, and I sat on the bed with a glass of wine, alternating between bursts of laughter and waves of disbelief. "Did you see their faces?" I asked him. I've never seen my father speechless before. Michael smiled gently. "You were magnificent, dignified. Meanwhile, your sister threw a tantrum over money that isn't hers." That night, my phone buzzed endlessly. First text from Alison, furious, then apologetic, then demanding. My mother left tearful voicemails begging me to return. Even Brad sent an awkward message apologizing for the disaster. My father remained silent. I turned the phone face down on the nightstand and whispered, "They'll have to wait." The next morning, as I stepped out of the shower, there was a knock at the hotel room door. Michael opened it to find my father standing there, rumpled and exhausted. "I need to speak with my daughter," he said. I wrapped myself in a robe and faced him. He sat heavily in the desk chair, his hands trembling. For nearly a minute, he said nothing. Finally, he murmured, 15 million, I still can't believe it." "It's not about the money, Dad," I said softly. He lifted his head, his eyes red. "I know. It's about how we treated you. We got it wrong, Clara. I wasn't a good father to you. We thought Alison needed more, and you would be fine. But that wasn't fair. We took the easy way out, and you suffered for it." His words cracked something inside me. I had expected defensiveness or excuses, not this raw admission. "There were thousands of moments," I said quietly. "Moments when I was invisible while Alison was celebrated. You missed my whole journey." He nodded, his voice rough. "And now you've built something incredible, and we weren't there for any of it. We missed it all." Before I could respond, his phone rang. He answered, speaking in hushed tones, then looked back at me with unease. "They're waiting at the house, your mother and Alison. They want to talk, all of us together." I glanced at Michael, who had been watching silently. "Is it worth it?" he asked. I took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to walk away forever, but another part needed closure. "I think I have to finish this," I said. Back at my parents' house, Alison's eyes were puffy from crying, but her jaw was set with determination. My mother rushed toward me, but I stepped back. "Let's just talk," Alison started, her voice brittle. "I want to apologize for how I reacted. But you have to admit, finding out my sister is secretly rich while I've been struggling, well, it's a lot." I folded my arms. "I've watched you take handouts from Mom and Dad your entire adult life. Tuition, rent, vacations. I never asked for or received a dime. And yet you think my success is something I owe you?" My mother's eyes pleaded. "We love you both. We just showed it differently." "You didn't show it to me at all," I answered flatly. "Name one time you celebrated me with the same enthusiasm you gave Alison. Name one time you put me first." Silence. Alison's voice rose again, sharp and entitled. "The past is the past. We're adults now. The real question is, what are you going to do to help your family now that you can?" "Nothing," I said. Her mouth dropped. "Nothing? You have $15 million, and you're doing nothing for us?" "That's right, because what you're asking for isn't support, it's entitlement. If Mom and Dad were facing medical bills or losing their home, that would be different. But you want me to fund your lifestyle. You've been handed everything your whole life. I built mine from nothing." The conversation spiraled into accusations, guilt trips, and pleas. My mother cried. Alison threatened to cut me off entirely. My father sat silent, defeated. Finally, Michael and I gathered our things. As we reached the door, my father followed us. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything." I nodded, unable to speak. We drove away, 3 days earlier than planned. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from Thanksgiving lingered like an ache that refused to fade. Alison flooded my inbox with messages, some dripping with resentment, others carefully worded pleas for sisterly generosity. My mother left voicemails filled with tears, her voice breaking as she begged me to reconsider, to think of family first. My father, true to form, remained mostly silent, though once he sent me a simple text that read, "Proud of you. Wish I'd said it sooner." For a while, I wasn't sure how to move forward. The little girl inside me still yearned for recognition, for the warmth of parents who had overlooked her. But the woman I had become knew better. I had fought too hard, built too much, to hand it over to people who saw me only as a safety net. Therapy helped. I began seeing a counselor who guided me through the complicated emotions, anger, grief, longing that churned together. She reminded me that setting boundaries didn't mean abandoning love, it meant protecting myself from harm. Michael stood by me through all of it. One evening, as we sat in my apartment overlooking the glittering city skyline, he said, "You've spent your whole life proving your worth. But you don't need to prove anything anymore. You are enough, Clara." With or without their approval. His words became a balm to my heart, and slowly I began to heal. I poured my energy back into my firm. Warren's strategic partners expanded into Europe and Asia, opening offices that brought in brilliant, diverse talent. I made it my mission to mentor young women in finance, determined to give them the encouragement my grandmother had once given me. Every time I spoke to a room of eager students, I felt her presence, proud and unyielding. Holidays changed. Instead of returning home, I created new traditions. Michael and I hosted friends who couldn't travel to their families, filling our loft with laughter, music, and the smell of roasted turkey. The first year we did it, I looked around the room at people clinking glasses and realized something profound. Family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes, it's the ones you choose, the ones who see you as you are and celebrate it. As for Alison, we drifted further apart. She still sent messages, alternating between bitterness and guilt, but I no longer felt the compulsion to respond. For the first time in my life, her shadow no longer loomed over me. My mother eventually softened, sending notes about how she missed me, though she rarely acknowledged the depth of the hurt she had caused. My father surprised me once by visiting New York alone. We sat on a park bench, sharing coffee, and he told me about his regrets, about how he wished he had paid more attention. It wasn't a full repair, but it was something. One crisp December night, as snowflakes drifted past the window, I found myself reflecting on everything. The girl who once stared at her bedroom walls painted pale yellow, wishing someone would notice her, had become a woman who commanded boardrooms and built an empire. But more than that, she had learned to define her worth on her own terms. If there's one thing I've taken from this journey, it's that silence does not mean weakness, and invisibility does not mean insignificance. Sometimes the overlooked daughter is the one who rises strongest, carrying within her the resilience to build a life beyond what anyone ever imagined. So, to anyone who has ever felt unseen, undervalued, or dismissed, your worth is not defined by those who fail to recognize it. You can build your own story, your own success, your own joy. And when the moment comes, you'll know, just as I did, that you are always enough.